All right. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, friend. I'm here with the notorious, the infamous, the wonderfully amazing Britt East. Britt is a best-selling author of A Gay Man's Guide to Life, which is a personal growth and development manual. I'm going to just interrupt the little formal thing. It's just like a transformational piece of artistry and poetic. Just, I don't even know. You just need to get your hands on it. Sidebar, that's I went off script for a minute. Anyway, it combines a memoir with practical and pragmatic advice to challenge and inspire gay men to really live their best lives. And in it, he presents an approachable, no nonsense path for gay men to set down their excuses and get down to work on the business of improving their lives. It's not any new age mumbo jumbo or wishy-washy self-help jargon, just real work focused on real results to unleash their true selves and unlock their best selves within. I was so like touched, moved, inspired. I'm roped in right from the beginning. I'm just like, what's next? So Britt uses his experience, his strength, and his hope to challenge and inspire change-oriented gay men to get down to the business of improving their lives, really with over 2 decades of personal growth and development experience in a variety of modalities, such as the 12 steps, nonviolent communication, yoga, meditation, talk therapy, and the Hoffman process. Britt's really committed to building a personal practice of self-discovery that he can then share with gay men everywhere. And he is sharing with gay men everywhere. So Britt, thank you so much, not just for being here, but for doing the work and then for documenting the work and for just being all the things that you are. I feel honored that I get to share space with you right now. So thank you for making the time and making yourself available and all the things.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so just a little why am I in the closet? This is Tales from the Closet. I did a conversation with Michael Judson Berry before earlier today. I don't know if you know, do you watch Schitt's Creek?
No. I almost watched zero television. I
I
know
get it.
I'm
I'm a
the
zero
worst.
tell, but like, just if you just put it, just
Okay.
give it a gander, a
Okay.
glance. Like I get it. It's an investment and it's pop culture and it's not like everything else. Um, but it's really special. It's a very special show. It's won Emmy, it's won all the things. And so Michael Justin Berry is he imitates he does impressions of Catherine O'Hara's lead
Oh my
character
gosh.
in
Well,
the
I love
show. And
her.
oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Another reason we put that show on your,
Yeah.
and it's like thematically, like the show really fits in with who you are as a person.
Okay,
Like
well, now I'm intrigued.
the community that they end up in, the humanity that they show in their character development. Now, it does
Yeah.
take a little bit to get into. It takes,
Okay.
some people aren't automatically, I was roped into it automatically, but yeah, so thematically it really fits in with your game as your service and community and just real authenticity and connection and family and like moving from this kind of like rags to riches story that they have. And so it really resonates with a piece of humanity.
Oh,
And
cool.
so yeah,
Sounds
so
great.
Moira is the name of Catherine O'Hara's character, and
Mm.
she's got all these wigs and these just wigs, and it's like a wall of wigs. I'm like, I got a wall of hats. Let's do it from that as the backdrop. And I'm like, I'm talking to Britt East today, a gay man's guide to life. Let's talk about the closet and like gross, right? But not gross because now we're grateful. So that was a huge like ADD thing. So what I wanted to do is just read some excerpts for anyone who's listening to this who has not read your book. They need to get it. So I'm going to do a couple little excerpts that spoke to me, and hopefully I won't butcher it because it's not all in order. I'm just taking bits and pieces out of it. You're probably going to be like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Philistine.
I know,
Ugh.
right? Right? Like cast me out. I'm the leper. Send me away. But things that really spoke to me, and I really appreciated your vulnerability and your authenticity and all the things. So, you said you had no friends and you were no friend. Well, just gonna read it. I had no friends and was no friend, and separateness became solitude, and daydreams became delusions until all that might have been never was. I only ever longed to be loved because to be loved was to belong, and to belong was to be real. But our society is brutal, and our culture is primitive. So I spent my time living the lives of others. Meanwhile, the me that should have been was stuck back there, waiting to be born. And when your life is a lie, there is no truth save the truth of mutual destruction. I hated weakness above all else, so I sharpened my fangs, desperately tried to grind down my sensitivities, disdained sympathy, and walked alone. What? Seriously? Like, that's my note to ask you. Like, it just says the word what? Like, what? Like, I want to know, like, what coping mechanisms did you develop? Share, I know a little bit about what you shared in the story, but like, that's so, like, so many, like, you could probably talk like for 12 hours just on those like 2 paragraphs that I read. So what coping mechanisms, like, how did you get, like, to be able to articulate that? Um, like, what was it like, like being in that experience for you, and what kind of coping mechanisms did you develop in that environment?
So I grew up in 1980s Tennessee, which was no joke. And as a fellow son of the South, I know that you know what that can be like. Um, it was like being in oblivion. Um, Not only did we have to wrestle with the pervasive, rampant bias, bigotry, stigma of homophobia that influenced all culture, but we also were growing up in the shadow of the height of AIDS in the US,
Mm-hmm.
um, the in the height of deaths due to AIDS, and so it tainted our sexual maturity.
Mm-hmm.
It was a form of sexual abuse, but it was also reckoning with a plague. And while
Yeah.
I was a few years, a precious few years, which likely saved my life, a precious few years removed from the generation that was going through it, I was maybe, 4 or 5 years behind them. So it was like, you know, there was just nobody. And I'm sure there was a vibrant gay scene in Nashville where I grew up because of the entertainment industry. But
Mm-hmm.
as a young person, I had no access to that. And let's face it, even the most well meaning parents rarely are able to raise culturally gay kids. And so, in
Right.
so many cases, we're left to fend for ourselves. And then, on top of all of this, I also had to live with the child abuse that I experienced at my family that was totally separate from the homophobia. And so all of this went into a cauldron and meant I felt utterly alone in the world. And part of that was my own doing. Part of it is I walked alone as a choice,
Mm-hmm.
because that was the best I knew how to do to stop the harm at that age. And then
Mm-hmm.
part of it, I was also a pariah. I was cast out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Through all the gender norms that I broke in terms of self expression, nascent sexuality. Also, just my way of moving through the world was different than the norm in my family. I had a lot of advantages and privilege as well. I have had the fortune of an amazing education, way more than many people in our society are given the chance to experience. I have an able body, I'm smart, I'm white, I'm male, ostensibly male for lack of a better term. I'm all these things. So I had a lot going for me. To answer your question about resilience, I had a lot that was just a gift to me, an unearned advantage that I could leverage to get to be in front of you today and you know, without some of those advantages, I likely wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard. And the best way I can put it, it was like you were living in oblivion and you were a ghost. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
nothing and I was surrounded by nobody. There was not one benevolent adult in my life that I had the capacity to experience. And so I was completely and utterly alone until I built a life with my own two hands.
Mm. Yeah. So in that, like, in the coping mechanism would just be like hiding, silence, just kind of like under the radar.
Yeah, a little bit. Now, what's interesting, like a lot of performers, I hid in plain sight. And
Mm.
so I'm a classical musician by training, and that used to be my professional career. So I spent a lot of time on stage, and I'm really comfortable on stage because that's an experience that I thought I could control. I could preserve
Mm,
my illusions of power and control and present a
mhm,
persona to the
mhm,
world, whereas just moving through the world organically felt very vulnerable and threatening. So I
mm,
would move through the world as quickly as possible to get to those experiences that I thought I could control. And so what that meant is I was building, on the one hand, I was building a resume that might have been impressive on its face, but I was not gaining any embodied wisdom, or I was not, gaining any rites of passage or knowledge or any experiences that are necessary to set a young person up for a successful adulthood. So at
mm.
some point, my life completely crashed and burned about a little over 20 years ago. And that gave me the opportunity to, at that point, start like Play-Doh, just start, molding my life
Yes.
from scratch with my own two hands. And luckily, I found all the modalities that you listed to kind of help me along the
Yes.
way.
Yeah. So I really appreciated that. Would you say, in the book you go in to describe how you really started the 12-step process, but in context of the codependent
Hmm.
relationship that you found yourself in, and the
Yeah.
boyfriend at the time who
Hmm.
was a sex addict? Was
Hmm.
that your first experience with, what we'll call the work, personal development work, taking
Hmm.
on the work of responsibility, taking responsibility for your life, other than the therapist in that you had in college? Was that kind of your
Yeah.
first um, step into the journey of what we'll call, authenticity?
Yeah, so I had a suicide attempt in college, which landed me in therapy, and that was a glimpse of it was like a band-aid. And so
Yeah.
I agree with your statement. The 12 steps were my entry into really owning my own personal growth and development. And
Mm-hmm.
to set the scene, like you said, I was codependent in a relationship. I had an excessive emotional reliance on my partner. we
Right.
we were in our early 20s, and we were together for about 5-6 years in the 90s, so it's pretty rare, at least in our social group. There were not that many folks to model what a healthy
Right.
relationship between two
Mm-hmm.
guys looked like at that age. And so we were just trying to figure it out on our own. And because I was fully unprepared for life, I had this desperate longing that I yearned for him to fill. And he became my everything, not just my boyfriend. He was my everything,
Yeah.
which was patently unfair. And so that meant I was completely codependent. And then when he was arrested for having sex with a minor, because of my codependency, my world shattered. What
Yeah.
would have been normally a traumatic event obliterated me.
Yeah.
But the grace in that is it meant I could start from scratch. The miracle was that he disclosed a sex addiction as part of that event, and
Mm-hmm.
he decided to get into the 12-step program for sex addicts, which at that time, this is the mid 90s, so there weren't that many resources available for sex addicts.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
but we found this 12-step program. He got in it, and he started getting better. And so then I got in the companion one. So it was called Codependence of Sex Addicts Anonymous.
Wow. Okay.
And so it's like Al-Anon to AA is
Right.
kind of
Mm.
the sister program of the sex addict program that he was in. Which I think was called National Sex Addicts Anonymous. There are several different programs, and now there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot, but back then there was just a handful. And so that sitting in those rooms, in those circles, living, experiencing the principles of the 12 steps for the first time, taking off my masks, being seen by benevolent witnesses
Mm-hmm.
and telling my story, being emotionally joined in it, it was thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I found my voice. And
Mm.
that's where I woke up, because I was on the wrong path. And
Yeah.
I'm friends with this guy today, and our husbands are friends. And so it's a story with a really beautiful ending.
Mm-hmm.
It was certainly painful and devastating to experience it, but we've come through to a place of healing, and now have known each other for 25 years, which is such a miracle
Yeah.
in gay culture. And I
Yeah.
treasure that relationship so much. So it has a really beautiful ending. And it was, the while it sounds horrible, and it would have been so enticing and easy to get kind of that juicy social validation by playing the victim, and I certainly was traumatized in the events, and there was a
Oh
part of
yeah,
it that
for
was the
sure.
victim, by having the willingness to lean into the pain, and by mainly thanks to him and the miracle, whatever grace got him to the 12 steps, that enticed me into it, and that's what changed my life. Otherwise, I think I would be on a really bad course.
Yeah, and so, kind of to dovetail into that, when you talk about, your current, your latest therapist, he said that he taught you, while you need to take care of business, and you don't need to be necessarily the CEO of your life, but there's grace that comes from letting life unfold of its own accord, and that the most effective progress is often made through indirect procedures. So, what do you tell me more about, like,
Yeah.
indirect procedures?
I am a weirdo. Because of my background in classical music, I'm exceptionally disciplined. So in classical music, when you do it professionally, you often spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day alone in a practice room, just looking for flaws in your technique as you play scales or etudes
Okay.
or play
Okay.
pieces. It's a little obsessive.
Okay.
And so what you do is you hone a skill of zeroing in on minute detail, and it gives you access to all sorts of superpowers, but they can get a little out of balance. So for me, it's really easy to create a set of goals, to commit to them, and to live and just go, full force, balls to the walls, implement them immediately. That comes effortlessly for me. And I know for a lot of people that is challenging, but the opposite is challenging for me because I
Mm,
am such a control freak, because I do find that sense of safety, that illusory sense of safety through the controlling and the details and the managing. What
mhm,
it does is
mhm,
it kills the energy of relatedness that I've
mm,
found. And when I act like the CEO of my life and I manage myself, quote unquote, speaking kind of metaphorically, and I assign myself goals and tasks, and I find that I lose the spark of joy, the sense of spontaneity that makes life worth living, and
mm,
that creates the space for in seeing the best in others and in savoring life. So my work is learning how to play. My work is learning
mm,
how to be
mhm.
silly and goofy. Whereas a lot of people, that comes naturally and they have to work at the discipline. I'm wired a little differently, and because of the
Right.
way the adverse experiences I had, I'm wired a little bit differently. So I have to work at the play. I have to work at the letting go, letting God kind of thing. That's my
Yeah.
deepest work.
Well, I mean, like, nature really is a spontaneous occurrence, right? So easing into that spontaneity
Mhm.
as an expression of our humanity in the present moment is really how we find that freedom, by, like, getting
Exactly.
the claws out of whatever we think we have. It's like, it's an illusion that we even have what we think we have, because we don't even
Exactly.
have it. So it's like, that's
Exactly.
cute. That's cute that you think
Exactly.
you had what you thought you had, but you didn't even have it, because nature can't be anything other than spontaneous. So
Exactly. That's
you're
beautifully said.
spontaneously holding on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
but might as well,
beautifully
like,
put.
lean into the spontaneity, where the beauty and the surrender and the
And
play
and
is.
not take yourself so seriously. Have a giggle, like enjoy life.
Right. Well, I really appreciate it in your guide, for anyone who doesn't know anything about it, like, how you really take this holistic approach, because that's definitely in alignment with, really, like, taking on this. We can't have a spiritual conversation when your body's shit, like, when you're not
Yeah,
treating your temple, and when you're not moving it,
exactly.
and, like, getting into this space where we're moving our body, we're tending to our mindset, we're having this, body, mind, spirit connection. So you do that, which I think is beautiful, but then you also tie in these real world practical advice things for career, finances, family, friends. And so it's really exquisitely packaged and well thought out and well organized. And, I can tell that you're a classically trained musician who's very disciplined, because it flowed in a beautiful way, in a thoughtful way, and was really beneficial. One of the things that popped up for me, of course, was the sex chapter. I mean, all the single ladies can appreciate it. what you said, because there is this, and you kind of touched on it a little bit before with this, what I call delayed adolescence.
Mhm.
This has been my experience. So I came out later in life. So I got married to a woman when I was not 14. Listen to me. I was married for 14 years to a woman. I got married when I was 21. And so, I came out, got divorced, did the whole thing at the age of 35, and I had two kids. So, we still have we have a delayed adolescence anyway, but compound that through any closeted experience, and it's even more pronounced. But what you said about sex was, but when fantasies prevent us from experiencing reciprocal emotional and physical intimacy, we have a problem. If we think straight men are better than gay men, we have a problem. If we have sex with straight men, we have a problem. If we filter effeminate men from our lives, we have a problem. If we think someone is too gay, we have a problem. If our preferences become prejudices, we have a problem. So what of this problem, like what is this impact that you've seen, which I feel are legitimate problems? I mean, it could be the delayed adolescence. It could be a lack of, which delayed adolescence to me is just a lack of making that emotional connection that you do make eventually. You come and you do the work. And this is what I've noticed in my own work and personal development work and all the coaches and trainings and seminars and retreats and all the things, where I actually come back into alignment with my grown-up self and my inner child self and doing all that. But what impact have you seen in the community for people who are still acting in their wounds, who are still acting emotionally unintelligent, who are acting out, in this space of judgment of like having these problems that you mentioned? What impact have you seen?
We are living amidst an epidemic of loneliness in among gay men, and
Mm,
there's all sorts of research to prove that. And I think most of us just know it intuitively,
mm,
and it comes from many different sources. So my first recommendation for the audience is to learn our shared history as queer
mm,
people. We
mhm.
stand on the shoulders of giants like James Baldwin, like Bayard Rustin. There's a great book that just came out in 2020 by Eric Cervini, who's a young, brilliant author, Harvard educated queer person. It's called The Deviance War, and it goes through the history of Frank Kameny, who was one of the queer rights pioneers in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and
Okay.
talks about his story, and then also interweaves the story of a lot of civil rights legislation and other gay rights activists in a way that shares about their personal lives, but even more importantly, gives you insight into the dynamics of our history that shape our daily lives.
Mm,
So, for
mhm.
instance, when you are prevented from congregating in a variety of locations through all sorts of arcane measures, like you can only congregate as queer people if you're standing up or if you're seated down, or you can get together but you can't dance, or whatever the arcane local restriction rules,
Right.
laws, regulations are. If you're prevented from congregating, if you feel unsafe for generations for having sex and seeking loving companionship, much less having celebrated reciprocal relationships, then it distorts the contours of your sex life. And
Yeah, for sure.
that's how bigotry impacts on us on a daily basis. Sex is a core human need, and so however that is expressed. And so if you are forced to have sex secretly or quickly in the bushes or in the back of tractor trailer trucks like in New York City in the 60s, or and you're forced to have it in bathhouses because you cannot legally cohabitate or you cannot legally congregate, then that distorts the contours of your sex life, and it might over time, over generations, make it a little bit more transactional.
Oh
Cut
yeah.
to
Just
today,
slightly.
where you see the rise of technology
Oh my
kind
gosh,
of
yes.
inadvertently facilitating that. It's really
Mhm.
easy to weaponize our wounds. Like you said, it's
Right.
really easy to check no Asians, no fats, no femmes on a filter on a hookup app and go about your business, not realizing that you're discriminating, you're acting on prejudices against whole segments of the population, but you're
Right.
also harming yourself because you're cutting yourself off from the chance of either shared energy or love. You're ruling
Yeah.
out people based on all sorts of other issues, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're also suffering. And so if you start to learn the various dynamics at play underneath these daily decisions that seem so easy and innocuous, then you can resist, you can stand in your own power and resist the bigotry and homophobia and be authentically who you are. You
Mm-hmm.
can shine your light as brightly as possible. You can follow the energy wherever it leads you, regardless of trivial things like race. You can follow that energy and delight in it. You can detach from outcomes, and you will attract more love in your life than you ever thought possible.
Yes, I love that. Like I have another note, but I'm like, let's just go. Let's go. I'm ready to marry myself like Sue Sylvester on Glee. Did you see that episode? Did you watch Glee where she married? I don't know. You already said you didn't watch TV, so
No, that does feel familiar though. I mean, sometimes like in pop culture is funny. It like has a way of finding you, even if you don't
uh-huh,
sit down and
uh-huh.
watch the show. So I feel like that's familiar. Like I saw a YouTube or a meme
Yeah,
about that.
she's just precious. I love that show. I've watched like 4 shows. I know I'm like it just seems like I'm all talking about it. But yeah, like getting out of that weaponize like what you said, like, about weaponizing our wounds and then getting out of that space to really move into that connected love, and the impact that has on our community. So, you tie up your work of art, I'm calling it, um with service and community and talking about, and it's such a beautiful, lovely thing because I think that's our next evolution as a community, the LGBTQIA plus, because you touched on it a little bit earlier where you said there really is we don't have an example, a generational example of what it looks like to age gracefully in the gay community, on the whole. Do you know what I mean? Like we lost so many from the epidemic. Like forget about a pandemic, it was an epidemic, and so we have so few who are have aged, and this is what it looks like. We don't know what a family dynamic looks like. We don't know what a community dynamic looks like. So we really are forging the path as we go. And I think particularly for men, in their 40s plus, right? I appreciate what you said about, knowing our history and acknowledging that we're standing on the shoulders of, really, really great, brave, heroic. The word heroic doesn't even do it justice. People who have come before us who have shown their light and done, in, incurred so much danger to their own personal lives to make our lives for us to have a conversation, for you to write your book, for me to write my book. Like that's a privilege that did not exist. And we still have an extremely long way to go inside the constructs of how do we build this community? How do we have that connected love? How do we get out of that space of judgment and all those things? So you said in your excerpt from your service and community chapter, the greatest service we can do for this world is to live our lives to the fullest, embody every ounce of our essence and our values to manifest our mission, bring forth that combination of talent, skill, and experience that is unique to us, and use it to the hilt, which I just love. I'm like, ah. So what change would occur if we all got this? What do you see as possible for the community, and what change would occur if everybody got this?
What I want is for us to start taking up more space in the world, in
Mm,
society. We are such good little boys so much of the
mm,
time.
mm.
We so often in the name of self-preservation, either economic safety or physical safety or just even sheer generosity, we pay undue deference to straight culture. And what I want us to do is to take up more space, stand tall in our authenticity. And what that's going to require is starting with the harm, not dwelling in it, not blaming
Right.
people, but acknowledging it so we can rise above it. And the
Yeah.
truth is, for generations, straight people tried to eradicate us.
Hmm.
And when you hold that in your heart as you walk through the course of your day, it will shape your interactions with others and you will
Yeah.
start to see people in a new light. And so it's important to move that energy as you start to really absorb it and witness it and learn the
Yeah.
history and
Hmm.
take it in. It's important to move the energy so you don't get stuck there.
Yes.
that you create space for grace and room for redemption,
Mm.
because none of us are beyond the power of redemption, even those who are intentionally causing us harm. They
Mm.
too have futures that are yet to be written,
Yeah.
and can learn and grow the same that we can learn and grow. We
Mm-hmm.
have to acknowledge the ways we're harming ourselves and each other, whether through racism, misogyny, our own homophobia. In a world steeped in straight supremacy, everybody makes homophobic choices from time to time,
Yeah.
even gay people.
Yeah.
Even gay
Yeah.
people. So we have to grant
Yeah.
straight people some generosity and hold
Mm.
ourselves accountable.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of personal growth work that's going to go into play to even figure out who we are, what makes us uniquely us, what makes us
Mm-hmm.
tick. And
Yeah.
to get back to your question, when we figure that out, when we have the agency to stand in our power, when we have the support and the resources, the personal practice of replenishment that helps build that resilience, and we can stand in our own power, then we can create the culture of our dreams. And I believe be the leaders of love in this world, show the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
world how to love. Straight culture is so fundamentally broken on so many levels. We can lead them to a different consciousness
Mm.
of love.
Mm. Yes. I don't even smoke and I need a cigarette after that. Thank you. That's so I was going to ask you kind of when you first said take up more space. I was going to be like, what do you mean by that? But I think you answered my question that I had like by the end, because it's like, this is the space of love. It's a container of love as we push through and are willing to be our authentic, vulnerable selves. We hold that space for the heterosexual men really to take on that journey, and this is a large reason why it's like I want to forward conversations like this, not just for gay men, but for straight men to benefit from the mutual space that they hold for us to process our own wound and to be in relationship to other men when there's not a sexual thing there. So heterosexual men can get this freedom of self-expression experience from the space that a
Mhm.
lot of men in the LGBTQ community
Exactly.
hold. And
Yes.
then, gay men can get a sense of safety and security and warmth and protection that they might have built up walls against through their own heterosexual
Mm,
woundedness, I'll call it.
yeah.
So, yay. I mean, I'm looking forward to, I mean, you said this is a kind of the end quote, but then not really the end. It's just the beginning. You said that I believe we are all in this together, that each of us took a little less, we would have a whole lot more, and that there is no greater wisdom than kindness, that you've never known a love like this love that you learn to feel for yourself and for everyone else, that lights you on fire and sets you free. It's as if you've been cracked open by the blessing of just walking with other people, being the you that you are, that you were always meant to be, and at long last being reborn.
Yeah, we all can create the moment in which we want to live.
Yeah.
We can't not control outside circumstances, but whenever something happens, there's a gap, a space before our response. And in that gap, we can sit and breathe and use
Mm-hmm.
consciousness to meet whatever the moment requires and act in our greatest good.
Yeah.
And that's a series of little steps each day that
Mm-hmm.
writ large changes cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening to a lecture by Jordan Peterson, I believe. Have you heard of him? I'll
No.
have to send you a link. He's got my friend introduced me to him, and he's just brilliant,
Mm,
brilliant lecturer, philosopher. Breaks down a lot of biblical mythology, which is beneficial for me coming from a fundamentalist
yeah.
upbringing, transitioning out of literalist interpretation into metaphoric,
Mhm.
mythological, psychological drama that the book is. But he said, in talking about, there's a Simpson episode where Homer Simpson is having, vodka with donuts, and someone's berating him about it, and he's like, "Oh, I checked with future Homer, and he said it's fine." Like, and so
I love
it's
Homer Simpson.
like,
Homer Simpson is my idol, by the way. I
okay,
love
yes,
Homer
we got a
Simpson.
TV reference that
Yes.
that lands. Um, but that's something that we don't often consider, is that
Yeah.
present moment, is that
Yeah.
impact of what I'm doing right now in the present moment, because, we feel like the present moment doesn't necessarily have the impact that we think it does because we're just having vodka and donuts, but really it does have that impact. And
Here's
so, yeah.
sorry, here's the thing. There's a paradox here. It takes a lot of learning and reading and growing and changing to build up this base of knowledge. But at the end of the day, that's not the place from which you live. You
Mm-hmm.
live from an embodied wisdom where
Mm,
you learn all you can, but eventually you set that aside. And through lived experience and insight, it filters into your body. I mean, almost literally. It's an
yeah.
embodied experience. So in the moment you're describing, it's not that you have to take a pause and consult a book and
Right.
write out some notes, although you can, especially as you're finding your footing. It's that over time, your technique, your practice is such, your personal practice of replenishment is such that you've built up this resilience so you can respond in the moment with great speed and spontaneity,
Mm,
agility, and flexibility because you have built up, it's really, I'm describing adulthood. You've built up this legacy of
yeah.
experience, this database that you can draw from, so you're actually reacting quickly in the moment, but you're drawing from this great lineage of knowledge and wisdom and embodied practice and
Yeah.
all of that. So there's a paradox. Yes, you have to learn this stuff, but then you let it all go. Just like as if you're an actor learning
Yes.
lines or a musician learning the music, you let all that go at the time of the performance.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's like really easing into that spontaneity because of the experience that you've had. And I think,
Exactly.
what Abraham Hicks calls the gift of contrast, knowing what we do want because we experience what we don't want. So
Yeah.
it's like we understand the experience of putting our hand on the hot stove and that
Exactly.
burns. So let's not do that anymore.
You don't have to read the manual every time. You
Or
your
having the
your body
experience of
does absorb it.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah, like moving past that control. So, a fun question I like to ask people is, imagine I'm your fairy godfather here with my magic wand.
Okay,
Um,
where is this going?
what would you like to see for yourself and for the world? If I'm here to grant you your wish.
Oh, so you're going to grant me. So, I think it's kind of what I described. I would like for gay guys, queer people everywhere to sharpen our elbows and be proud of who we are, to stand a little bit taller,
Mm,
take up a little bit more space,
mm,
even at the cost of our own popularity, even if we bear some consequences that might not always be pleasant. I think in the long run, that authenticity is going to lead us to vulnerability, which is the
mm,
true signal of strength and the um, fertile ground of relatedness.
mm. That's exquisite. I'm sold. Sign me up. I'm like, yes, all of it. Where do we sign up? So, yeah, like you're just very, very gifted and very articulate with your words. And I'm inspired by you for allowing yourself to be that conduit
Oh, thank
of,
you.
that channel of just expression, and it's, I think Gay Hendricks calls in The Big Leap. Have you read that book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks? Zone of genius, and really
Mm,
just being in that flow and being in that, like, and when we're in that flow and in that space of trust and surrender and spontaneity and play, like that's where we can be of most service.
yes,
So,
exactly,
you
exactly.
know,
Service is the highest form of play.
mm. So would you say conversely that that's also true? Play is the highest form of service?
Sorry, actually, you said what I meant to say. Play is the highest form of service, is what I meant to say.
Oh, okay. Because you said
You got it
services.
right. I
Okay,
was
got
wrong.
it. Okay. So okay.
It
So could
probably
you
works
say
both
service?
ways.
Yeah, where's work both ways? I mean, if our awareness and our consciousness is in this place of spontaneity, of unconditional love, dropping the judgments, we're it's going to naturally occur
Yes.
where things don't escalate into two wounds fighting with one
It's the
another.
logical consequences of two hearts meeting.
Mm, yes. Yes. That's good. Well, I am so I'm just like you put me in speechless mode, which doesn't happen very often.
I don't
Um
think I've ever seen you in speechless mode,
I
so
know, because I'm like, I don't have two hearts meeting. I think, well, I appreciate that our hearts came together today, and then through our journey. Where can people connect with you, and how can people connect with you? Tell me all the things.
Yeah, so the hub for all of my work is my website, britteast.com, B as in boy, RITTEAST, all one word.com. And it has links to all my socials right there. So it's the
Yep.
easiest way to find that. I also publish a free blog almost every day. I have a bunch of free articles that I've written and published that you can access right through my website. And then it has a link where I've consolidated all the online stores for independent booksellers and Amazon and
Oh,
everybody in
nice.
between where you can buy the book. So
Nice.
websites, one-stop shopping, best place to go.
Yes. Well, I'm impressed as usual, and I feel blessed and honored that you took time and were of service today, just to me and obviously for the community of people, whoever will see this. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And until next time, my friend.
Yeah, you're a special guy. It was a thrill to chat with you.
Yeah.
I love anytime we can connect. So I
Yeah, for
really
sure.
appreciate it.
Just getting started, my friend.
Thanks.